His reviews will get you further than the film will ever go. If you give him just a moment of your time, he'll let you know which movies rock, which movies stink, which movies shouldn't have been released. Say hello to Confused Matthew.
Wow. This one was a doozy. F for Fake was written and directed by the late Orson Welles, who many of you know created Citizen Kane, a film that many, including myself, consider to be the greatest film ever made. Kane was his first film, whereas F for Fake was his last. Let's just say he didn't end his film career the way he began it. But that's not to say that there is nothing good about this film at all. The problem, if it is a problem, is that it doesn't play like a film. What it comes off as is a living entity that suffers from attention deficit disorder. I can't even rightly say that this film is about the famous art forger Elmire, because that is only one part of the story, and even that part comes and goes on a whim. This film talks about pretty much whatever it wants. Elmire is in there somewhere, but with him is Howard Hughes, Cliff Irving, Oja Kodar, and Flying Saucers, and even Orson Welles himself. The word about seems to have no meaning in the film. It's not exactly a work of fiction, but it isn't quite a documentary by any means either. If this film is about anything, it is essentially about fakes, and even throws a few in itself for good measure. I can only speculate that the way in which this film was written and made was intended to be something of an editing experiment. I've been told that the film influenced the way films could be edited from that moment on, but the only evidence I see of that came from Natural Born Killers, where the scenes cut from one to another so fast you might be given a seizure if not careful. I'm not kidding about this. The film will be on an informative track explaining how Elmire fooled everyone in the art world, and then out of the blue, we will see a scene of Orson Welles in a hat and cape before an arbitrary setting, doling out lines of poetry. And if not that, then we see a tiny monkey. I'm not sure what the cinematic strategy of this was, but as for my reaction, I was eventually exhausted by this kind of thing. As for the film's content, some of it was damned interesting. We learn in the film that Elmire was able to fool all of the so-called experts in the art world, passing his work off as the genuine article. Elmire was never even intimidated by the experts. For him, they didn't know shit. So the question comes up in the film as to whether there are any real experts on anything. This actually got me thinking for a moment. I don't consider myself an expert in anything, but I do pride myself on being able to spot certain artists before being told they were involved. However, in all honesty, if no one had told me any better, I would have sworn that The Fifth Element and Across the Universe were both Baz Luhrmann films. And if no one had told me any better, I would also have sworn that Australia was not a Luhrmann. So much for the experts. In addition to these seemingly random trains of thought, we also get a peek into the past of Orson Welles' career. It's interesting to hear accounts from the famous War of the Worlds scare from the man himself, but if you're a fan of Welles, it's nothing you probably didn't already know anyway. The film bows out by giving you a fascinating piece of information about Pablo Picasso's career that you may never have heard, and you'll just have to watch the film to find out why that is. I once said of Welles that he's the kind of man where even if you don't like what he has to say, you still love to listen to him say it. Much of this film would have me putting that theory to the test like never before. This is the most oddly constructed film I have ever seen in my life, which was undoubtedly deliberate on the part of Welles. My guess is that the film would be more valuable to those in film school than to the general public, but if you're interested in what note Welles went out on, you may want to consider checking this one out. I personally can't imagine ever watching this film again, which isn't something I can say about Citizen Kane, but I do have to admit that there were a few moments in the film that stuck in my mind. And no, it wasn't just Welles' girlfriend parading around topless. The film was not bad, it simply suffers from being over-stylized and confused. Watching F for Fake can be a frustrating experience, yet oddly fulfilling in a subconscious way. This is another one of those requested reviews where I find myself exhausting what I have to say about the film. But if you thought this was brief, I can guarantee you that my next requested review will force me to pace myself. The end.